electric current flows from one object to another, what can we say about the magnitudes of the two objects? They were different. So whenever there's a spark, does charge flow through or into a circuit? If I buy electrical wire, does it come empty or is it already full of electrons? It's already full of electrons. Charge flows through. It doesn't flow into it. It's not like the power company is making electrons and they're filling up our wires. No, the electrons are in the wires. They're just pushing them. They're providing the push. They were just sitting still with no voltage. If your car has a 12-volt battery, it means that one of the terminals is 12 volts different than the other one until it's a dead battery. Then they're 0 volts different. They're the same. No, bad. All right. Now, let's get to amps. Amps. Amps is the unit for the flow of electric current named after Mr. Ampere here. André-Marie Ampere. Now I got two waterfalls here. This one might be slightly photoshopped, but that looks like Niagara Falls. And this one is Mary Jane Falls in our very own Nevada. Both are very steep. I wouldn't want to fall off of either one. They're both very steep. They're both, the difference between this point and this point and this point and this point are basically the same. So they have, in our electrical analogy, the same difference, the same voltage. So falling off of each of these is going to provide quite the drop. But one of these has more current. One of these has more current. Obviously, this one has more current because there's more water available. Now, if we took all this water and put it in Nevada, well, yeah, this one would have a lot of current too. Because this is just as steep. It's just as steep. So we could do this here. We just need the water to do it. So here's the point. Just because you have the voltage doesn't mean you're going to have a lot of electricity. Just because you have the voltage, the difference, the drop, the difference, doesn't mean you're going to have a lot of electricity. We need to know how much is going to flow. Now that flow, let's talk about it. Will water flow more easily through a wide pipe or a narrow pipe? Wide pipe or narrow pipe? It's going to flow better through a wide pipe. So when we have wires, look at this wire here. Look at this. See that? That's like super thin. That's what they say, 24 gauge wire. 24, it's like nothing. If I plug this into the outlets, it would melt it. It's so thin. The electrons want to travel. It's just that there's no, when they're plugged in, it's just that the highway is so thin. The electrons would try to go like 65, 70 miles an hour through this little city street. Sidewalk. We can call this a sidewalk. And that'd be crazy if we tried to drive that fast down this tiny street. All right. So that wouldn't be good for our sidewalks if cars were driving 70 miles an hour. So you're not going to get much flow. It's going to be a lot of traffic and dangerous. You're going to melt your wire, ruin your sidewalk. But when you're talking about voltage, now we plug in a wire. The quality of that wire is going to determine how much current we can actually get. All right. Now to help us talk about current, I kind of need to get to the ohms as well, the resistance. Look at this beautiful river. Look at it. You can do this with a camera if you leave your shutter open for a long time. I mean, of course, that lets a lot of light in, so you have to lower the aperture and things like that. But anyway, besides the point, we got this beautiful, and it's flowing, so we know there's a difference. This is higher up than down here, so the water is flowing this way. And we notice something in this picture. The rocks. The rocks are doing what? We have the slope, that's our voltage. We have the water, that's our current. But we also have these rocks. They are part of the story as well. They're slowing our current. So there are things in a circuit that slow. Let me just put this all up for you. There are things in a circuit that slow electricity. Rocks in the river, if you will. The thickness of the wire. Here's the thin wire, right? I showed you the 18 gauge. This here, I have it bent here, but this other wire, that's 12 gauge. This is 12 gauge. This is what's in your walls in your house, is 12 gauge. There might be, the numbers actually work backwards with wires. Bigger number means smaller, so that might be confusing. But 24 versus 12, and you might have some 14 gauge, which is a little bit thinner. Numbers go backwards with electrical wires. And the gauge, the thickness. The thickness of the wire will affect how much your electricity flows. The length of the wire. Longer wires are worse than shorter wires. It's gonna, metals aren't perfect conductors. I mean, they're conductors, but they're not perfect. So if I send electricity from here to New York, there's gonna be a lot of electricity lost. Where did it go? It turns into heat, because there's some resistance. Even if you make your wire out of gold, it's still not gonna be perfect. So the shorter the wire, the better as far as conserving energy. So we don't want to just make one big national power plant and just go out from there, because it would have long distances to travel to some places. It also wouldn't be strategically safe to only have one power plant. And then the type of material. You can make it out of copper or iron, or like this wire here, or gold. This wire here is made out of iron. It's really cheap. It'll do certain jobs well, but the rest poorly. You know, if you're going to have speaker wire and you want to have a beautiful sound system, you're going to want the best wire. Now you can use lamp cord, you know, as your speaker wire, because speakers have two holes, just like two points, right? Because it's electricity. It has two. And you could use just lamp cord if you wanted, but even better if you want a better quality of sound and you have quality wire. You're going to have gold plated, you can do copper, you can do gold plated, you can do solid gold, but now you're getting real expensive at that point. But the type of material. Now, when you have these things, and you play them all out, this kind of metal, this thickness, this length, that's going to offer resistance, and we measure resistance in ohms. Named after what this sign, that symbol, that horseshoe, is called the omega. It's in the Greek alphabet, the omega. So ohm. Why did they pick the word ohm? Because that was the guy's name, George Ohm. All right, let's talk about the path of least resistance. The path of least resistance is that electricity has that one goal. That hasn't changed. Electricity's goal is to get from here to the ground, from my brother to the ground, to me even, to anything different, to the most different thing. That's all it wants. It just wants to spread out. It wants to get to this equilibrium. It's all packed in. It's repelled. It just wants to get me away. I don't like to be trapped on an insulator. I don't like to be stuck in a person. I want to get especially to a larger area like the Earth, the whole planet. So that's all it wants. Electricity doesn't want to hurt you. It's not out to get you. It's not even thinking. I sometimes pretend it's thinking, but really it's just getting pulled towards this other charge that's different from itself. Now, you know, we got the mazes. I always like to, you know, why don't you just go around the outside? You know what I mean? Why not? All right. So, now you can go through the middle. If you give electricity a choice, you can go through this toaster. You can go through this toaster and make my bread toasty. Or I'm taking a bath with my toaster, because, you know, you never know when you want a piece of toast. All right, and I take the toaster and I drop it in the bathtub. Now I've given it two choices. It can continue to travel through the toaster, toasting my bread, or the electricity can go into the toaster, leave the toaster into the water, and go down the drain pipe to the earth. Which one is it going to take? Finish its path through the toaster, which it had been doing for years, or now just skip the toaster and all those thin wires and just shoot through the drain pipe? I go through the drain pipe. Problem. I'm in the tub with the drain pipe and the water. So some of that electricity is going to go through me. So that's going to be a problem. Now also, as it goes through the drain pipe and water, is it going to go the same speed as through the thin wires? And it's the same voltage. That's important. Let's pause that. It's the same voltage. When I drop the toaster accidentally into the bathtub, the outlet is 120 volts. Is there some guy at NV Energy sitting there like this, waiting for people to drop toasters in bathtubs, and then when it does, they crank up the voltage just to stick it to us? Now that outlet's not 120, it's 240 volts, it's 500 volts. No, it's still 120 volts. That's a 120 volt socket. But the current is higher because it has a better wire. So it's the same outlet, the same voltage, the same push. But now because it's not going through thin wires but through a thick pipe, it's going to have more current and blast through it. It's going to hurt me more. There's a formula. Resistance equals voltage over current. Voltage over current. Resistance equals V over C. Now, you know how I like to play with font sizes. R equals V over C. Accidentally. I electrocuted this thing with the little toy thing. That broke it. Whoops! Well, I just pulled the battery out and it seems to have reset it. Okay. Resistance equals volts over current. Watch the relationship here. Remember how math works. If I am in the bathtub and I'm covered in water and I drop the toaster in, now the resistance, do I resist electricity the same as I'm wet or dry and now in a bathtub and the pipe versus the wires? The resistance has gone up or down. With everything wet and using large pipes, the resistance, does it resist the electricity? No. The resistance goes down. The resistance went smaller. Now the voltage stays the same. That's still 120 volts. If this stays the same, but this got smaller and it's going to stay equal, this thing has to change. How do I make a fraction? This got small. This side got smaller. I need to make this side smaller. Since I can't shrink the V, it's the same outlet, then what do I have to do? I have to make the denominator bigger or smaller? Bigger or smaller? Bigger. This is proportional, inversely proportional, but the smaller this gets, the larger this gets. And you can flip the story around. The bigger this gets, the smaller that gets. But the formula, this is how the formula works. There's a relationship between those three terms, volts, currents, and current and amp. And current and ohms. How does wetness affect the resistance of your body? I'm going to put them all up. It lowers the resistance. You have more current now going through you. And why is it a bad idea to handle electrical devices in the bathtub? The voltage is the same, but your resistance has gone down. Your resistance has gone down, so the current is going to go up if you get electrocuted. When we were electrocuting ourselves with the ball last week in that video, we were electrocuting. The ball was always the Van de Graaff generator. Remember when I was holding the hands with Heidi and Samantha? The ball was always the same voltage. It was always the same voltage. But when I grabbed the pipe, it was a new resistance. Instead of our shoes having to go through our resistant shoes, it could go through the non-resistant pipe. And now with less resistance, there was more current. It hurt more. It hurt more people, and it hurt more as well. Let's talk about a lie detector. A lie detector. So the way a lie detector works, and when you end up in you know, Mr. McDaniel's office or Mr. Cody's office, and they're questioning you, you know, they're not just listening to your words. They're watching your eyes. They're watching your agitation. They're watching to see if you're sweating. But if you want to get really good and scientific at this, then you really want to get some measurements. So if you're going to go to a court trial, they're going to use an official lie detector. And they want to know, and it doesn't actually measure lies, it measures your sweat. So what they do is they got, if they really want to put it to you, they can put you in the room. They're watching you through the mirrors. They got the light on you so you can't see out. You're uncomfortable. They've deprived you of comfort and so you're just agitated. You're nervous already, and they start asking you questions. They want to measure your pupil dilation. They want to see where your eyes are looking. They're videoing this. They're listening to your voice inflections, the speed at which you answer, and the difference between these things, your blood pressure, your heart rate. You're hooked up to machines, man. And it's hard enough to lie to a middle school teen. How hard is it going to be to the FBI or the police? And this time it's for murder. Now, they also are going to measure your sweat. But how do they measure your sweat? They put two little, conductors on your fingers. They can put it on this finger and this finger, or they can do, side to side. However, as they're asking you questions, your sweat changes. It's constantly changing. More, less, more. But how do you just scrape off the sweat and put it in a bucket? That's gross. All right. And you want it moment by moment, because the sweat's always coming out and it's always evaporating. Every time you sweat a little bit extra, they send a little current through you. It's almost like the lie detector out there sending a little current through me, and they're measuring it with the needle. Like I had a needle thing measuring electricity, and there's a pencil on it, right? And then the paper is moving underneath it. But every time I sweat a little bit extra, my resistance drops, the current goes up, and it moves the needle more. And then every time I don't lie, let's not even say lie, every time I don't sweat as much, for whatever reason, maybe I'm just calm, then my sweat evaporates, my resistance climbs, my resistance goes up as I dry off, and then the current drops. So they ask you the simple questions and the hard questions, and they watch the difference. See if your timeline, if you can tell an entire timeline of a lie with perfect calmness and ease and make it just flow like you were telling the truth the whole time. I remember this one detective show where they were doing a lie detector test, and the guy was always beating the test. But they knew he was guilty. They just needed the test. How is he beating this test? Turns out he had stuck a thumbtack, from a bulletin board in his shoe. This is a TV drama. And every time they asked him a question, hard question, easy question, what's your name? He would stab his toe into this thumbtack in his shoe. And that would make him sweat. And then the hard questions and the easy questions, he's always stabbing himself. And so he was always sweating the entire test. So his sweat always was high. It never showed a change, really, to tell when he was telling the truth or not. And then at the end of the show, the police officer figures this out somehow because he's limping. And hey, let me walk you down to your car. And I guess you're innocent. We gotta let you go. Let me walk you down. Oh, the elevator's broken. I'll walk you down the stairs. The guy's his shoes starting to bleed, and they get all the way. Hey, let's go back up. Let's go back up. We forgot some paperwork. I need you to sign one more thing. And the guy's, oh, and then by this time, the blood is all over the floor. And the police officer, smiles and look what you. And he's busted. All right, but the lie detector, he was trying to beat it by keeping his sweat levels high, even during the easy questions. All right. So high voltage doesn't produce shock on its own. The voltage provides the push. How much actually flows because of that push? A good push is important. You need the difference. The land, you need the charge difference. That's important. You have to have that. But how much actually goes is going to depend on the wire, the thickness, the wetness of you, and all that. All that. Let's see here. Let's get these up here. So when you have somebody gets electrocuted, you can feel this. These are the amps. Now it's not telling us the volts. So we don't care about the volts. It's the amps that matter. So this could all be on whether you're wearing shoes barefooted or standing in a puddle with bare feet and all that, or standing in a puddle with shoes. That's going to affect your current, but these are the numbers that affect us. I can feel this. Ouch! Ooh, I've lost control of my muscles. Now my muscles don't do anything, and here my heart has stopped. And so there is when you go to see an electric fence, and there's an electric fence, and you're like, hey, I'm going to go touch that electric fence. And then you go to the electric fence, and you touch it, zap. one of the things that you don't want to do is touch it like this, with your hand like this, because if it zaps and it's really on, it can make you grab the wire and now you're stuck. So whenever you touch an electric wire, you want to touch it with the back of your hand, if you're going to touch it at all. And then if it makes you contract, because that's what electricity does, it makes you contract, your hand will pull away. Ow. But the other thing you can do is take a piece of grass, usually if you're near an electric fence or some farm and some, like, take a long piece of green grass and you lay the green grass onto the fence. And the water will travel through the green grass like a wire, because there's water and stuff dissolved in that water that conducts that electricity to your finger, and you will feel a thump, thump, thump in your thumb. Now it's not going to hurt as much because it isn't a perfect wire. It's got a lot of resistance. It's a piece of grass, for crying out loud. But if you do want to feel that it's, oh wow, this is kind of interesting, then move closer to the fence. Move closer to the fence with the grass. You'll feel the electricity even more. What's changed? You've changed the length of the wire, the grass. You've changed the resistance. It resists less when it's a shorter piece of grass. And now you can have more current because you've lowered the resistance. But the voltage was always the same. That was coming from the farm barn over there. That's where the voltage was coming from. You're playing with the resistance and you're noticing the current difference. All right, that's good. All right, that's good, and we'll have one more week of material, and then we're done.